Hey guys, Harrison I'm back once again with a brand new video for you, and welcome back to Dre Talks. Dre Talks, in case you didn't know, if anyone's new to the channel, is a series where I just tend to talk about things that, may not necessarily be Formula 1 related, even though in this case it kind of is. And since it doesn't really fit any of my other series, I thought let's call it a Dre Talks video and go from there, really. This is an interesting one, and this is one I've been trying to do and get right for a long time. Maybe not a really long time, maybe the last month or so. I've been thinking about putting this kind of video together. And I wasn't going to do it until the banter stream came around, and I changed my mind for a little bit. But more recently, I've kind of felt like doing it again, and the final trigger and the catalyst to make me make a video like this was from Total Biscuit. You may know him as the PC gaming review critic on YouTube. One of the biggest guys on YouTube, as a matter of fact. I think he's got something in the region of 2 million subscribers, and obviously a huge influence on the gaming industry as a reviewer and a critiquer. Total Biscuit made a video last week talking about the problem with hype, and that video was him talking about how many games journalists out there are basically creating glorified hype pieces for certain video games to make them seem like they're going to be really good when they come out, when it turns out they may not entirely be up to that same standard, using games like Watch Dogs for an example, and websites like IGN, who in their previews admit they're not even playing the game properly or just watching off a screen, and yet they're coming out with all these detailed opinions which don't make any sense. And now I'm going to tackle the hype regarding F1 2014 and 15 later on in the video, but it was definitely a catalyst and an influence that kind of inspired me to make this video about what I like to call the culture of the Codies F1 era, so to speak, in the Codies F1 community. And it's something that I wanted to get off my chest for a little while, and seeing all this talk about F1 2014 coming out in October, and F1 2015 coming out sometime next year, has got me thinking about all this. And one of the first influences I made for a video about this was a blog made by one of my favourite YouTubers in the world, Alex Gillen. And he was talking about how Codies was meant to be a make or break game. And to do it, he made comparisons to games that had similar times of development, like The Last of Us, which scored a 95 on Metacritic, and GTA 5, which scored a 97 on Metacritic, and he compared it to F1 2013, which is a 77 on his console. I think the PC was a 77 rating for the game on Metacritic. Now, I guess you didn't know what Metacritic is. It's basically like the Rotten Tomatoes, but for games, in the sense of they bring together a whole bunch of community-based reviews based on the public and the press, and they ran it together, and they give you one general score. It's not foolproof, but it gives you a good idea on how good a game is, roughly. And he meant, now I think it's a bit of an unfair comparison to compare F1 2013 to games like The Last of Us and games like GTA 5, because yes, those games did have 5 or 6 years of development in the works, but the problem with that is that you have to develop very quickly with games like this, because it's a yearly franchise. You don't even get a full year to develop them. By the time the new game's out for a month, you're already working on next year's, and that's not an ideal way for a developer to work. If you had a FIFA game every 2 years instead of every one, I guarantee the quality would go up. And a lot of the quality of these games is based on the engine and the development foundation that you have. If you want proof of this, look at the FIFA franchise and their last 5 games from 2010 and their Metacritic scores: 90, 88, 92, 90, and they dropped off a little bit with 2014 getting an 84, but the Xbox One version got an 88. So the foundation of FIFA has always been very solid, and even with minor tweaks year on year, they all still kind of roughly score the same. The Formula 1 franchise has the same kind of problem. Look at the Metacritic scores again on the 360 for all 4 recent Codemasters F1 games since they developed it full time for the current generation consoles. 2010, 84. 2011, 84. 2012, guess what? 84. And 2013, they actually went backwards with 79. So, a lot of it comes down to the core foundation of the game itself. This is the problem with yearly franchises. You're never going to create a masterpiece when you're developing a new game every single year. But I also, on the other side of that coin, also have to say, if you've been refining the same thing for 5 years now, surely the 5th version of a game is going to be excellent, or borderline perfect. I mean, I could say the same thing about the Street Fighter franchise, how they had Street Fighter 4, Super Street Fighter 4, Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition 2012, and now finally Ultra Street Fighter 4, like the 5th incarnation of that game, and that still has issues. But watch Maximilian's videos for that. Do you see what I mean? Like, while I think it's a little bit unfair, I also think they really should have gotten this right by now, given this is their 5th attempt of a game. And to be fair to Codemasters, some of their elements of their games have improved. I think the handling model has gotten better from year to year. I mean, Matty pointed this out because he was playing F1 2010 as a video last night on his channel, and he was talking about the handling model and how the game already had a pretty decent handling model to begin with. And it's gotten better, because I know 2011 was pretty bad because, you know, you could gain full advantage by turning full lock all the time and gained more grip by doing that, which just isn't how Formula 1 works at all. But 2012 and 2013, they're refining it and they're getting it better, and I think they're generally going towards something which is pretty darn good. Also, I like the fact they are trying to make the game a more well-rounded and complete experience. As much as 2010 and 2011 were solid games, outside of a career mode, there wasn't really much to do, besides time attack and online. Now, the game was developed in the sense of league racing, which I think is becoming incredibly popular and incredibly rewarding. I mean, Luke Spring himself of Codemasters is a huge advocate of league racing, the Apex racing, the Apex Online racing, what used to be the ARL, and obviously TRL and etc., the Pinnacle League, etc., etc. You know, we all know how that kind of works now. And yeah, like, scenario mode I think was a good addition, despite that going a little bit backwards. I think scenario mode in this year's game was actually a little bit worse than Champions mode in 2012 because of the level of presentation, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And having classic cars, they are trying to make it a more well-rounded, more having a game that has a little bit more longevity to it rather than just playing career mode or going online all the time, which is kind of limiting to a degree, which I think is a good thing. I think overall having more modes to use is definitely a good thing, I would say, if it's done right. But in other issues, they've also gone backwards, like I said before, the level of presentation. Like F1 2010 and 2011, you had paddocks, you had obviously, you had interviews, you had, the level of detail was incredible. You had pit girls, you had an emphasis on what they called living the life and having the experience of a driver, and it was that extra care and attention of presentation that made the game better and made the game more rewarding. And they've gone backwards on that. We've gone from that to being in a boring wind tunnel in 2012 and 2013 in a boring development factory with no soul, no human element there really. It's just you looking at a car and navigating a bunch of bland menus. They've definitely gone backwards in that department, ignoring many sim-based elements like tyre wear. Tyre wear is not something you can really do anything about in this game. I think it's without doubt a scripted thing. And how do you go about improving tyre management? I don't think that's really an element in these Codies games. It's already been proven to have been somewhat scripted. And as a result of that, it's not a true sim experience. I mean, Codies have always, with their games, drifted somewhere between arcade and sim. And I'll talk about that again in a little bit. Better wheel support. I mean, if you're gonna have wheel support for a game like this, get it right. I mean, guys on the wheels are still complaining about things like steering lock and things like that, which isn't ideal. And again, they've had wheel support since the very first game, so why is it still needing refinement? The online netcode for the game is absolutely terrible. It's ruining league racing, which is a major part of the game, and the online is a really, really important part of the game, because the single player modes do get boring. And as a result of that, you need online to be good, because if online is good, you can carry that for a long, long time with your games. For example, Grid's single player campaign was pretty good, but nothing particularly special, and you could complete it in about 6 hours. 6 to 8 hours, I would say. The online was really, really good with Grid, and I stuck around playing Grid for like 2 years after its original release, because the online play was so good. Like, the online can make or break a game a lot of the time. It's absolutely critical in things like first-person shooters, for example, but in the racing game industry, it's important too. And like I said, the league racing is becoming incredibly popular online now with these Codies games, with these F1 games. People want to see top-level gameplay between humans because the AI isn't that great. So, for the netcode to be so badly wrong still after 4 years, I think is very disappointing. Now, as a result of this, these ideas I'm talking about, like the classic cars, like scenario mode, are seemingly half-baked. The classic cars didn't really work. They're a fun gimmick to start off with, but nobody touched them past October. I think they should have done more with it, you know, like have a classic career mode, or, you know, have a greater influence on the game rather than just a handful of scenarios, basically, which you can do in 30 minutes. Like, why would anyone go back there? Give us a reason to come back to it, you know? But that never became a thing, really. You know, is that the wrong approach? Is Codies arcade not really an arcade, but not really a simulation approach the right way to go about it? Because Codies have done that with a lot of their games, with the Grid franchise, with the Dirt franchise. I know Codies don't make sims, but, you know, it's not welcoming enough for arcade players either, because... And I know this because look at the quality of the people who play the game online a lot of the time. A lot of them don't know what they're doing, especially when a new F1 game comes out. You go online to start off with, and there's a bunch of noob drivers who clearly don't know how to play the game properly. So is the game welcoming enough for the arcade audience? Which I think is actually a good thing, why they're having a new extra easy difficulty level, because, you know, you need to be as introducing as possible to new players. It's a difficult balance to get right, I will admit. But maybe playing both ends against the middle in terms of arcade versus simulator and trying to find a happy medium isn't the right approach. Maybe you should go full arcade like F1 2009 was on the Wii, or do you want to try and go for something that's more of a full simulation like an R-Factor, like an Assetto Corsa, for example, which is both in development right now, or, you know, both continually getting better, finding new updates, and constantly working to try and find the best possible simulation-based elements out there, because we all know the popularity of Formula Sim Racing, for example, and how they were able to get it right. Why can't we do the same with a console-based game, you know? Is that approach right? Is oversimplifying going to put off the hardcores? I don't know. But the thing is with the hardcore audience as well is that I'm not sure we're the right guys to point this out either. I am blessed with a channel of over 5,000 subscribers, and I'm not even close to the biggest dudes in this community. We have guys like Into the Barrier, who has like the better part of 50,000 subs. We have Tiamat Marduk, who has over 35,000. Gillen has over 10,000. Safra has over 20,000, if I'm not mistaken, or very close to 20,000 if I'm not mistaken. Arava has over 10k. Fizzy has over 7k. You see my point? We're actually kind of blessed to have such a big influence on Codemasters, because they want to talk to us, they want to work with us, they support people like us, which is fantastic. I mentioned this before in previous videos about how we shouldn't abuse that right, because look, for example, to compare Polyphony and Sony with Gran Turismo. They don't tell us shit about their game. They have like no social media presence, really, and getting support for the game and getting an idea of where to put the game at, it's impossible. They don't talk to people like us, they don't support people like us. Codies get that the people like us are very passionate about their game, and we want them to make the best possible game, and that's great. The problem with that is that as a result of our hardcore nature, should we really be the ones to be able to go out there and have said influence. I don't want to sound really corny and mention superhero movies, but with great power comes great responsibility. And do we, as a hardcore audience, know what we want either? That's a good question, because I lean more towards the casual end of things. Moreover, guys like Alex Gillen, for example, are going to go more towards the simulation end. You know, he was pushing hard for an overtake button to be in next year's game. And you got to get the balance right between that. Do you go full technical with the overtake button and things like the ERS and the MGS systems and things like that, or the ERS system, because, you know, it's a difficult one. You know, like, are you trying to alienate the casual fans, or are you trying to lean towards something more hardcore? Are you trying to create some kind of happy medium here? And I think a lot of us in this community are more influential than we realise. I mean, I started to realise this when people started commenting on my videos saying, "Oh, I bought the game because I watched your videos." I've had this happen to me on 7 or 8 occasions, where people have said, "Oh, I bought MotoGP 14 because of you," or, you know, "I've watched your videos. Is the game really good? Is it worth buying? Do you find the game fun?" And yeah, we are more influential than we realise more often than not. They'll watch us, they'll like what they see, and they'll go out and buy the game themselves. And we've got to be very, very careful with this. And this was me going back to talking about Hype and Total Biscuit earlier. I think directors of our stature and our size, who have this massive influence on the F1 community and people who watch Formula 1 videos on YouTube, we need to stop being biased, we need to stop being kiss-ups, and we need to be honest with ourselves here. And I know some people are, and I applaud those people who are unbiased and who are unafraid to go out there and criticise, like I said, like Gillen. I mean, I think his approach is wrong sometimes, but I respect and appreciate the fact he's not afraid to say what he means, and he's passionate about trying to create as good an F1 game as possible. And for that to happen, we have to be honest with ourselves. The problem is, I know a lot of people who I think are kiss-ups, and who are trying to get into bed with Codies so they can benefit their own channels. And that's a problem, you know? And if people are biased, people are going to buy. People are going to be influenced by that, and are going to have this mantra of constantly applauding something that isn't perfect. I've seen over-the-top comments on these hot lap trailers they're releasing for F1 2014, which aren't very good. Like, these hot lap videos are glorified teaser trailers. They're not showing anything that actually matters about the game, like, i.e. pure gameplay like you're going to get when you put the disc in the machine. Not even like proper onboard camera shots like they were in previous F1 games, where it's purely from an onboard perspective. Instead, we're getting 50 different camera angles like you would get on the replays to confuse people and distract them from the actual game itself. Like, look at the Sochi one they put out a couple of days ago. Like, how much of it is actually an onboard shot we would use within the game? 3-4 seconds, maybe? A lot of it is the pure replay cams, and it doesn't give us a true idea of what the game's actually going to look like. Yet, in the comments, I see comments of, "Oh, this looks fantastic, it looks amazing." No, it doesn't. It's a glorified teaser trailer and a distraction. It's a distraction. It's like shiny hood ornament syndrome, I like to call it. It's like, oh, look at this shiny new thing, it looks amazing, when you actually break it down and look at the plot holes, and look at the holes in the issues with it, it doesn't look great. I mean, again, Matty made a great video about this on his channel, breaking down the hot lap trailer of Nico Hulkenberg's Spa video and intermediate tyres, and even mentioning things like how the spray wasn't even coming off the tyres correctly. And I'm like, what? How can they still be doing this in 2014? It's their 5th game. Like, it's ridiculous. And I think, as one of my friends who mentioned this, Gino, a guy called Crekkan on Twitter, follow him, he's a really nice guy, by the way, and he said himself, like, we as F1 directors really do kind of owe it to ourselves to be honest with our audience, because if we don't, I don't want to mislead people. Me as a human being, I don't want to lie to people and mislead them and tell them that this game is amazing and it's perfect when it isn't. As an aspiring journalist, I owe it to you guys to be objective. Like, I'm not going to bullshit people because it might get me more opportunities. That's not how games journalism should work. That's not how journalism should work in general. So I think we need to be careful with that. And another thing we have to be careful about is that no matter how much we all bitch and complain as F1 YouTubers, we're going to buy their games anyway. So the problem with that is that we've already given Codemasters our money, which is all that really matters. In the end, what matters is their bottom line and how much money they're making and how many games they're selling. The issue with that, though, is their sales figures are going down. So maybe they should heed a little bit of a notice when it comes to these things, but the problem is that half of us who are complaining about this shit on the internet are going to buy the game anyway. So we kind of have to be a little bit careful of hypocrisy, and I think a lot of people are in denial of this. So it's a difficult one to blend, and this overall is what makes the culture of the F1 community on here and dealing with Codies games so confusing and so head-scratching sometimes. And I think it's something we all need to take on the head and realise what we're doing, you know, before we all start spiralling out of control. I mean, I've saw people on here bitch about not having your own freaking career mode number. And I'm like, really? Like, that's not going to stop you buying the game. Like, so it's not really worth bitching about. If the handling model sucks, then you've got something that's worth complaining about. But we're conflicted. I don't think even we know what we want sometimes. And I think, as well as that, we're all a little bit hypocritical by buying games that we all have so many issues with, apparently. But I invite you all to comment on this. I'd love to hear your 2 cents on this one and your perspective on the whole situation. Because the problem with hype and the problem with what we do as directors, it's all a little bit conflicting, and it's all a little bit confusing for a guy like me who's kind of in the middle and watches it all from the sidelines a little bit. I don't really chip in on the quality of the games more often than not because I just play it. But even I know that there's issues there. I mean, I stopped playing F1 2012 because I didn't enjoy it. Like, in 2013. Like, that was a problem. And I'm not sure where this community goes from here in terms of the quality of the games, how F1 2014 kind of has a whiff of a placeholder game about it, and how the nature of F1 2015 coming out next year will play into that, because a lot of us are going to be double dipping next year. The better part of £100 on possibly 2 games in less than a year. It's not good, and I think that's something we need to take into account. But I'd love to hear you guys' perspective on this as always, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. And whether you agree or disagree, please, all I say is that be respectful in the comments, and that's all I ask. If you agree or disagree, that's absolutely fine. I'd just like to hear your 2 cents on the whole thing, and just be respectful. I know you guys probably will be in the comments anyway, because I trust and respect you guys. But yeah, until next time, I've been Harrison101. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Sayonara.